Get started. Key features of our water management plan. This plan was developed by county water users for the benefit of Wichita County. All the work that was done was by that team that you saw up there. So you did have a lot of resources and information to work with, but it was all established by folks here in Wichita County. It's a process that's based on local conditions. It's based on the kind of agriculture we have here, the kind of crops that we grow, the weather patterns. It's all about what we do here in Wichita County. It's not a plan that came from somewhere else. Participation is voluntary. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We've done the best that we can to come up with a good plan. We think it's going to be very effective, and we'll show you how that's going to work. But in order to really make a difference, we need participation. So it is voluntary, but we need some folks to sign on to make it work. We realize that because this is kind of a first-time thing, it's not likely that we got everything right the first time, that our plan is perfect. So we have provisions in the plan for it to be reviewed every 3 years, to be revised based on lessons that we learn and changes that are needed. And it's going to be governed by people who participate in the plan. So there is a provision for a governing board, but in order to be on the board, in order to be a voter, you have to participate in the plan. So it is literally self-directed. There's also some provisions in it that keeps everybody accountable, because it doesn't mean much if we all sign up for a plan and don't ever carry it out. So there are some provisions that, while the plan is voluntary, and there are provisions to terminate the plan if that's necessary, there is some accountability there. So there's some provisions to keep it meaningful. We've spent, I believe we started back in February on this, and we've spent many hours looking at different scenarios, different possibilities, what would be the best approach to conserve enough water to make a difference. The Kansas Geological Survey developed a very detailed groundwater model, a big computer program type of a model that covers our whole region, and it includes all of Wichita County. And they worked with us very closely to model a whole bunch of different scenarios. So we asked them, okay, what happens if we cut 10%? What happens if we cut 20, 30, 50? Or what happens if we cut a little bit now and then a little bit more later and a little bit more later? We literally looked at dozens of scenarios. Obviously, the scenario that saved the most water was cutting 50% today and sticking that way. That's got some issues, though. That's a hard road to go. I mean, there's some economic impacts, some major management impacts. So we really spent a lot of time looking at an incremental approach, and what we came up with is what you see on the screen there. 4 incremental steps, starting out essentially in 2017 with a 29% reduction based on historical use. 7 years later, ramping that up to 36%. Another 7 years to 43%, and finally in 2038, getting to that 50% level. What the model showed us is that we can take an incremental approach and have nearly the same effect as taking that severe cut up front. And probably the best way to show that is on the next slide. So what we have here, the 2 rectangles that you see are maps of Wichita County. If you look at the map that says no change in irrigation practices, that's if we just go forward the way we are. So the key takeaway there is look at those areas that are colored anywhere from kind of a light orange to a dark orange. Those areas represent anything from excessively depleted to severely depleted areas of the aquifer. The grid that you see on the map is basically half-mile cells or quarter section grid. So if you look at the county there, there's a lot of orange if we don't change. That's basically saying there's virtually no water to work with. in that period of time, that roughly 30 years period of time. What the model showed us is if we take this incremental step and have pretty good participation, we can eliminate a lot of that dark orange. So if you look at the map that says voluntary participation in the plan, you don't see very much of the dark orange. You see a lot less of the lighter orange. When you see the yellow and the green, we still have a water resource that's usable for irrigation. So that's what we're looking at. Doing nothing versus if we get enough participation, we can still have something to work with in the future. In order to encourage participation, we built in some flexibility provisions. So these are provisions that you don't have right now with your current water rights. So one of the provisions is we're going to have pretty much complete flexibility in place of use. So place of use are your irrigated acres. Your water right, as it stands right now, has a specific location and number of acres tied to each water right, to each well. If you participate in this plan, you can pretty much designate your place of use however you want it to be. You can make it more acres than it currently is, or less acres, lots of different combinations. So for folks that want to spread their water out over more acres, this is a possibility. For folks that want to concentrate their water on lesser acres to maximize production, you can do that as well. Just kind of streamlines that process and gives you more tools for management. We also have a provision for what we're calling management units for multiple wells. So we know that it's pretty common practice to tie multiple wells together to supply one sprinkler. And that can get kind of complicated under the current water right system. So we have provisions in here, which I'll go over here a little bit later, so you can define a management unit that would include multiple wells, establish a quantity of use, and then distribute that pretty much however you want through the wells in that management unit. So again, that gives you more flexibility for using those wells and using that quantity in return for taking reductions. Another provision that we have, we're calling it water banking provision, but basically what that is when you get your annual allocation of water, which I'll explain a little bit later, if you don't use all of that, anything that's left over can be rolled over to the next year, just like a savings account. So if we have a wet year, you don't need to irrigate much, you didn't use very much of your annual allocation, you can take that savings, carry it forward, and continue to carry it forward as long as you want to. So you can literally bank or build some water. So that's a feature where, again, in return for participating and taking this reduction, we give you the flexibility that if you're really going to manage water well, to just hang on to that. And finally, we have something we came up with, a deposit schedule, and that's just the manner in which the water will be allocated throughout the 7-year increment of the plan. And that's just a provision to reduce risk a little bit. What we basically do, and I'll go over this in more detail, is give you 2 times your annual allocation the first year of the plan. So you get double the amount just to provide a cushion up front. So if we have a drought to deal with early in the 7-year term of the plan, you've got some extra water there to deal with. We have one of those times where we get $7 corn again, and you want to take advantage of that, you got a little bit of water to work with there. So we'll illustrate this as we go on. Okay, so the concept that we used was taking recent water use history and applying a reduction to that. So one of our first tasks was to figure out, okay, what history should we use? How much? Should it be 10 years, 20 years, 2 years? What makes sense? What we came up with was using the last 7 years of history, basically 2009 through 2015. We have water use records for that. We felt like that 7-year period was long enough to reflect typical crop rotations, typical variations in our weather patterns, just the different management decisions that folks are going to make. but also short enough that we weren't going so far back, we were looking at unrealistic water use that really doesn't happen anymore. So when we took a look at that, we went to K-State Weather Data Library, got all the monthly rainfall totals, annual totals, did a little analysis on that. Basically, from 2000 through 2015 for Wichita County, the average rainfall was 19.43 inches. The normal average rainfall for the period of April through September during that period, or basically the growing season, was 14.41 inches. When we looked at our period, our basis period, 2009 through 2015, the average annual rainfall was 15.98 inches, which is 82% of that normal. And the growing season was basically 12 inches, for 83% of that normal. So the key thing to take away from here is our basis period is a little bit drier than normal. It includes a really bad year of drought. Yeah, it includes a couple wetter than normal years. But we're looking at irrigation use during a period of time when it was a little drier than normal. There was probably a little bit more usage and more decision-making on how to use water. So we feel like it's reasonable. It's not, we didn't pick years that were abnormally wet. Okay, so just a little illustration here. We got an example water right. We're calling water right A, but this is actually a water right here in Wichita County. If you look at the smaller table on the left, that's what's on the water right on paper right now. So this water right originally had an authorized quantity of 320 acre feet. Back in the day when it was established, the well pumped 1,010 gallons a minute, quite a bit different than today's conditions for 160 acres of irrigation. Well, if we take a look at the use history for that 2009 through 2015 period, you can see the numbers up there. Basically varies from 142.6 acre feet up to almost 193 acre feet. So quite a bit less than what the water right would authorize. So we take the 7-year average, that turns out to be 174.11 acre feet. So that 7-year average and that quantity, that 174 acre feet for this water right, that is the basis or the starting point for the management plan. So we're going to take that quantity, and that's what we're going to apply the reduction to. So in this case, as you remember on that 4-step incremental reduction slide, the first reduction is 29%. So the reduction factor is basically 100% minus 29%, or 71% of the water retained. So we take the 174.11 acre feet times 71%, the resulting quantity, 123.62 acre feet. Under this plan, that would be the annual allocation that this water right would receive if it's enrolled in the plan. I want to talk a little bit about the deposit schedule. So that 123.62 acre feet, that's the core value that we're using here. So using this deposit schedule, in the first year of the plan, you will receive 2 times that amount in your water account. So 2 times 123, that's how much water you'll have access to in the first year of the plan. For years 2 through 6, you'll get 1 times that amount, or 123 acre feet. In the last year, there is no allocation. Okay, so you are getting 7 times that annual allocation, but we're just giving you a little extra up front to work with to deal with unforeseen circumstances and help you manage your risk a little bit. So this is something that we kind of came up late in the process because we had a lot of feedback that said, well, yeah, I'm all for conserving, but what if the drought hits in the first year of the plan and I just don't have much to work with and I can't save my crop and so on and so forth. This was just a factor to get some water up front, still achieve the conservation that we're after, but give you some more flexibility to manage the water. Okay, so that same water right A, if we carry this process out, it's a 7-year period. So we start in 2017, the plan would run through 2023, 29% reduction is applied. So the first year, 247 acre-feet would be available for use. For 2018 through 2022, you get a deposit of 123.62 acre-feet. Last year, there was no deposit. It's the makeup year. But you know that's coming, and it's at the very end. So that the incentive there is to manage water and carry a little reserve forward, so that lack of a deposit in last year doesn't hurt you too bad. Okay, so people have asked, what happens if maybe I don't enroll 2017, maybe I hang back for a year or two and kind of see how things go? We have provisions for that. We want to keep everybody kind of on a level playing field, and we definitely want to reach those 4-step increments. So what we did for the delayed enrollment is we increased that reduction factor by 1% per year. So in this example, if a person chose to enroll and develop their plan in 2019, it's a 2-year delay, so that 29%, add 2% to that, 31%. Same process, that same average 174 acre-feet that we saw in the earlier slide, 31% reduction is applied to it. So what was 123 acre-feet in the previous example becomes 120 acre-feet. Still have the same deposit schedule factor, so you get 2 times that the first year. The big difference here in the effect of the delay is in 2024, we go to that next incremental reduction. That 30 would go from 29% to 36%. And that's where you see that other next step in the reduction kick in. So you can see the 100, because of the greater reduction, the 120 acre-feet becomes 111.43 acre-feet. So that is a consideration. If you look at the numbers, this was 832 acre-feet total during a 7-year period. In the 2017 enrollment, it's 865 acre-feet, so you actually got a little bit more water for enrolling early. It's about a 4% difference. So delayed enrollment is not a huge loss of water, but there's some incentive to get in early there. Okay, so we talked about water banking, or kind of a savings account. That's what this next example shows. So this is that same water right A, enrollment in 2017, 29% reduction. You can see the deposit schedule. We start out in that third column with 247 acre-feet and then 123 for the next 5 years. So look at the beginning balance column. So in year 1, we're going to start out with 247 acre-feet. The column with the red numbers, that's the actual use. So this is just an example of how this water banking could work. So in that first year of 115 acre-feet was used, that leaves 132 acre-feet left over. That 132 acre-feet would be applied to the next year, year 2, added to the 123.62 acre-feet, and in that year 2 or 2018, you start out with 255.86 acre-feet. So all this is a checkbook ledger. You get a paycheck, so to speak, on an annual basis. You get a water deposit. You use the water. Anything that's left over stays in your account and carries over and can be used in the next year. So in this example, the first 3 years we have pretty modest water use. Whether it's related to a lot of abundant rainfall or kind of crops or close management. In this example, in year 4, we kind of programmed in a drought year. So we have been using 100 to 115 acre-feet. That year we needed 180 acre-feet. But because of the accumulated savings, it's there and more. So you go through that year, use 180 acre feet. There's 111 left over because of the accumulated savings that gets rolled over. And you can see how the numbers work through. So this is just an example. Can't guarantee that that's how the weather's going to be or how things are going to be, but it's just an example to show that there is an advantage to, if you can closely manage your water, you get to keep it and carry it forward. Also want to talk about how a management unit would be set up. In this particular example, we have 3 water rights, basically 3 wells that would be tied together and operated in one management unit. This is just, again, the base water right. This is what the water right looked like when it was perfected. 320 acre feet available for A, 386 for B, 254 for C. You know, back in the good old days, quite a bit of water. So again, these are actual water rights here in Wichita County. So again, here's the 7-year history, 2009 through 2015. Those are actual use numbers that were reported on water use, your annual water use report forms. So there's the use, you can see the averages, and then those 3 figures highlighted in blue at the bottom are added together to arrive at the 431.5 acre feet. So that is the annual allocation for this management unit. So that's the amount of water you're going to start out with in the plan for this management unit. So then you take that amount, and in this case, in a 2017 enrollment, you apply the 29% reduction. That 431 acre feet basically gets reduced to 306.37 acre feet. Again, in the first year, you get a deposit of twice that amount. And then carry on year 2 through 6 with a single amount. But the key thing here is that amount of water can be distributed however you want among the wells that are enrolled in that management unit. So it gives you some flexibility on how those wells are pumped. But again, the process is take your 7-year history from 2009 through 2015. That's the basis. That's where the plan begins. The reduction factors are applied to that to give you your annual allocation. For the 7-year period, you get 2 times that the first year, 1 times that years 2 through 6, none the last year. And then you have all the flexibility to use the water. And we have provisions to tie more than 1 well together into a larger management unit. That's the basic process. I think it's, as I said at the beginning, the most realistic approach is for you all to make an appointment, to sit down with us, get your particular water rights out in front of us, and go through the process so you know exactly what you're going to get.